are now continuing with the questions. You've got your client in front of you, but you want to make sure you're sticking with neshama, you're sticking with core. What you need to understand is that there is a core for soul. In other words, your soul part is your mind, will, emotions. There will be a core there, but it's just where your soul functions. So it's a gathering up of your personality and the soul function. But then there's a core of the spirit, and that is the one. So make sure that you're working with the core of the spirit, which is neshama, and not with the soul. Just remember, the programming and all that stuff is going to come through in the soulish level, and we don't want to go there. What else I want to speak to you about now that we're on the soul, it was very interesting. A while back, I received some DVDs from people in Pretoria that have found this new method of deliverance. And they asked me, please, would I look at it and see what do I think about it, and so on. I just felt that there was a lot of confusion there. And I felt that they were confusing whatever the new theory is, what they've now discovered, versus DID. And then we started to see who's actually attending this new teaching. And a lot of the people that are actually DID were attending it. And they were thinking it's fantastic. And it's wonderful because at least it takes the emphasis off the fact that I'm DID. It gives it another label. It's called demonic soul copies. The people that are involved there, we've got to really be very careful. This is a diversion. This is to take people away. This is demonically really planned, and it's not the people, okay? We know who's behind it. It's the spirit behind it. So Satan is trying to divert people to get away from the ministry of DID and getting into the real deal, to really help the people, to get to proper core. And so people have gone into this demonic soul copies, and people are manifesting all over. And I've had so many people contact me, Joburg, Pretoria way, that got involved with this ministry, but there was such confusion and there was really a mess. And they asked, please, how do we get out of it? We need to break the stuff that's come over our lives. So it's very confusing. Doug, I shared it with you, and immediately you could see the deception. So if you could just share what you feel.
In the presenter, these are mostly multiples. In the presenter, they get an image or what they perceive to be a demonic soul copy. What if that's part of the core trying to come forward? That's what I thought. So the core is testing presenter to see if you will accept and all the defenses. It's trying to come forward in a lot of ways. If that is now labeled as a demonic soul copy, then the presenter can be, well, I can be fine now. I don't have to really deal with core stuff because in reality, that's just a soul copy. So I just saw this without knowing anything about it. As soon as I heard about it, I said, this is a diversion. I don't know, maybe the people are well-meaning. What a convenient way to not even get to what we're talking about here today. Oh, I dismiss this.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, Amanda, when you're talking about getting into the real core, and the core that's perpetrator stuff, demonic, what if that's just a soul copy?
Okay, so can you see the deception? Can you see the plan of Satan to divert the church from actually getting to the real deal? To send us on this bunny trail of chasing after demonic soul copies. There's really confusion, and it's, as we said, it's not the people. We're not judging the people, please. It's the enemy behind it.
So whenever there's confusion, just so you know, God is not the author of confusion, the God of peace. If they're stuck in confusion, that's a memory state that goes back to the foundational incest bond with the biological father or a representation of biological father. In the Hebrew of Leviticus chapter 20, verse 12, where the word incest is translated there, which is a violation of God, the Hebrew word for incest is a violation of divine order causing confusion. So I know now, wherever there's confusion, or they're stuck in confusion, this is a projection that's coming out. It always has its foundation in the incest bond. But we know that anything that results in a confusion, God's not there. Because 1 Corinthians 14 is not the author of confusion, but the God of peace.
You know, we just watched this and we just thought, oh boy, this is serious, because so many people are going to be diverted into a wrong direction and not really getting to the real ministry of what the people need. We want to know, are we sticking with core? So if there's inconsistency in the answers, then you are speaking to them, you are asking them questions, and if there's inconsistency, in other words, they say one thing now, and you say, okay, we're going to get to the questions about what's on your birth certificate and all of that. But if they say one thing and then a little bit later they say something else, then hey, but there's inconsistency here. So we're not really working with core. So we see here, with Neshama, we have the capacity for understanding. There's consistency in the answers that they give because they are then working with Neshama, and it's not whatever is in the mind and from the soul and what they're throwing out from the soulish level. So Neshama is always core. So when you work with Neshama, you're working with core. And so we need to stick with the Neshama.
The definition of Neshama is life, and then also there's understanding. The Hebrew for understanding is bin. It means between two. So if you're in a core conflict, we're not going to take sides. We just speak to that domain that's in the center. It's been dead. We call you forth. You are not opposed. Ultimately, you know both sides. Because the word understanding there, Job 32:8, it means discernment. An aspect of Neshama is discernment. So whatever these conflicts are, that's not representing Neshama. The Neshama will know what's going on between the two domains.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we want to know, as the counselor, you're a coach. You're just a coach. You come alongside, you guide them, you're helping them, but you can't do the work. They have to do the work. In the beginning, coach your client how Neshama works. And when you hear the question, you must answer your first thought. This is now how you're coaching them. I'm going to ask you a question. It's not a trick question. I'm not trying to get information from you. I'm wanting you to understand yourself. So that's why I'm asking the questions. When you hear the question, don't think, don't pause, don't take time. Your immediate reaction, your immediate answer is what will come from Neshama. And then when they say something, it's like, oh, it can't be. Then you say no. Then it says, no, but this is a lie. I lied. Because become a good liar. Become a good reporter. Just report what you hear. Because many times it's quite shocking when they hear the things coming out of their mouth because the presenter didn't know. They don't know this. Remember, the walls are very thick. And so the presenter is only created at about 3 years old. All right. And so you coach them. And you know, I have counseled people on email. And I have taken them through this process that I say, now listen, I'm going to ask you a question and I want your first answer. Don't even think to try and impress me with anything else. I want your first reaction. First thought that comes. And I'm telling you, I have done email with so many people already and worked through a process with them to get them at least going. Because there aren't workers. We don't have enough workers. All right, so you coach them, underline the fact that the question is not because you're curious or you are programming them. Because remember, they don't know why you're asking these questions. Because in the cult, that's what they do. They hammer you so that they make sure you are programmed right and you answer right according to them. Now, you asking questions as the counselor, and so they're suspicious. So tell them, listen, I'm not trying to get information from you. So please, I'm not programming you. So just listen to the question. It is to help them better understand themselves. So as a counselor, you will many times already know the answer. Okay, because it's something you've done with many years of experience. I mean, Doug has got it all under his belt. He's got all the notches under his belt. We're still learning, all right? We're in the process and we're learning. And so through many years of doing this work and experience, so the more you work, the more you're going to understand. You, as the counselor, will be able to discern better as you work in this field. All right, so when I ask you the question, I want you to answer first thought. Okay? So please don't go into the soul. Don't go into your mind at all. Nothing like that. No thinking. Don't try and think what you're going to answer me. First thought. Immediate. So we see here, if you start to pause and analyze, or you're trying to control the information, you have just sabotaged the process. Okay. So this is really, and you know, Doug smells it. I mean, he smells it when they are going wrong. You know, when they are not answering. Then he says, you're controlling. You're trying to control the information. Don't control. First thought, let Neshama speak. We see, just be a faithful reporter. Then they say, but the stuff, I can't believe it. Just be a good liar too. So just speak it out. Speak it out. Whatever it is, first thought, what comes. Doesn't matter how bizarre it sounds. Neshama is the key. Working with Neshama is the key. And so the first thought, just keep on reporting regardless of the programming and the triggers and the multiple voices. Because remember, you are a multiple. So there's going to be multiple voices. But just keep on reporting. Just keep with Neshama. And the more you learn and train and practice in answering first thought, the easier it's going to become. In the beginning, it's like, what are we doing? But the more you're able, maybe you can share that as well, Michelle. Just the more you're flowing in this, but Neshama is the key. All right, now we're going to the sample interview. I'm going to start looking at the questions. The initial questions that I'm going to speak to you. You have a birth certificate, right? Yes, right. I do. Give me your full names as they are written on your birth certificate. So this is your first initial. Sit down with them. What is your date of birth? Okay, so you write it down. All the names like Anna, Maria, whatever. You know, some of us have got some long names. Whatever's on your birth certificate and the date that you were born. And then we say, now I'm going to speak to that which represents your conception identity. In other words, way back, sperm and ovum. We're going to go there. All right, so I'm going to go to the conception identity. Because we are working with Neshama, this is not cognitive. It's not a brain function memory. This is Neshama. It's Neshama knowing. So it's not something you're going to know in your memories. There's not going to be memories. There's not going to be something recorded of what you can remember at all. There's nothing there. There's no pathway that can tell you this. So we've got to find how to work with Neshama. The person on your birth certificate, you've given me the names of whoever is on your birth certificate. Does it represent the date and the name of the person who you are in your core identity, who can go all the way back to conception when sperm and ovum came together? Are you with me? I've got names on my birth certificate. I'm speaking to you. You've told me your names. Can I now speak to that core person, that one, the person on your birth certificate? Does it represent the date? In other words, is it the same person who was conceived? The one on the birth certificate and the one conceived, is it the same person? Many times, no. It's not. Doug?
The way I get to that, speaking to who you are and the person who speaks with final authority for your conception identity, did this body come into the world on the same date that's on the birth certificate of the presenter? And they say usually no. Is it before or after? If they say after, I know somebody's been messing with you. Come on, let's go back and try it again. Is it the same date, or was who you are, the speaking of core identity, for this physical body, is your birth certificate on the same date or earlier? And it's always earlier. Always earlier. That gets past the 3-year-old back all the way to that whole domain you're never supposed to know behind the presenter. It's the same body, but it has a different date, birth certificate, and name.
I know this is hard. I know. But the first time we heard this is like, whew. Just come again, say that again. Because you've got a birth certificate, and all of us, we faithfully believe that that's our birth date, that's our names, that's it. It's a certificate. It's got a stamp on it, you know. But now when you say to them, okay, this body, is it the same, this body that was right there at conception, is it the same body as what the certificate that we're holding, or is it different? That's, as Doug says, you're going to get past what the presenter knows and believes. We're going to get past it by that question.
The core identity, they're always older.
Older, the core identity. Okay. Do you represent that person who was there at conception? And usually the answer is no. So that's how you can bypass and get to the real answers. Write out your birth certificate. So now you're saying, okay, you've told me you're not the same person as what's on your birth certificate. It's not your date of birth, and there's something else going on here. So now, if you could write out your own birth certificate as that which represents who you are in your core identity, speaking with authority from your identity as your conception person. In other words, we want to go back to sperm and ovum, conception. And we want that part to speak. And if that part has to write a birth certificate, what names will they put on the birth certificate? How would you write out your new birth certificate? Can you see where we're going? Because we want now to find out past presenter. We want to go deeper. We want to go way back. If something happened and went wrong, there at conception. We're trying to navigate to get to conception because that's where the beginning was. We want a new birth certificate. So what names are you going to write? There are 3 primary identities. Tom Hawkins, he's been in South Africa and he's done training before his death, and he came to train Barbara and Paul. You knew him, Doug.
Mm-hmm. I felt he was a good friend, and the 3 primary identities, I always called them core shields. He called them primary identities. The primary identities will also be shielding the singularity that represents the origin, source, and beginning of the 3. That's really hidden and dead. But you have to get those 3 identities, and these 3 primary identities, which, starting with conception, who's first, who's second, who's third. Usually in those primary identities, they have the names that represent royal families.
People have asked, Doug, how do you know they're royal? Can you answer that one? How do you know it's a royal?
How do they know they're royal? Well, I just go back to, for example, who is your programmer? Who is the primary abuser? Who is the very first person, once you get to that original conception identity, who is the first father who incested you? You're in the king's circle, there could be a bunch of fathers, okay? Who's the original representation of the biological father in Jesus' name who violated you? Usually it's George. And now we know King George VI, who is in that bloodline, goes back to Nimrod. But we now know King George VI was shielding Hitler because his bloodline was spliced in 1945. So there's a splice. So once you get to the biological father, if it's King George VI, that's where most of them are. You have Nicholas Romanov on the prophet side. When you get into that, what is your name? There's Alexandra, Alexia, Alexandra, Maria, Anastasia. You have all these things that are royal names. This kind of all fit into Elizabeth. It's real common. You've met them all.
So in the beginning, God created man in his own image. He said, let us create man according to our image. So the us is the 3 persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And so the image is a singular image of God, but there are 3 domains in a person's primary identity. So you're going to have 3 main ones. And Tom Hawkins came and he opened up the whole thing about the identities, the 3 primary identities. And he said that they are here in the front part of the brain, those primary identities, where the alters are in the back of the brain. So they did brain scans, and they could actually prove it with brain scans that the 3 primary identities is here in the front part of the brain, and the alters and programming is in the back of the brain. He said, don't waste your time and mess around going to the back of the brain and getting lost in the programming. Work with the 3 primary identities, which is here, which is the very strong part of the person. Primary identities make up the core. That's why I stick with the primary identities. They can also be called core shields. The primaries often represent domains with a specific hierarchy within a person's system. The details are less important at the beginning, as things will change as a person becomes co-conscious. But you are saying to them, okay, if you write out your birth certificate, going to conception, your new birth certificate, what names are you going to write down? Then they'll give you 3 names, and normally the presenter is number 4. The name that they come with, whoever it is that they're coming with, that will be the presenter, the one that's living life. But remember, the presenter was created at 3. And that's where the old way told us, no, that's the host. Get the host, because the host is the one that lives life. But the host and the presenter was only created at 3. And purposefully, so that the presenter will not know about what's really going on in this person's life. Once we have the birth certificate of the person who is speaking with final authority, that is the person from age 12, in other words, it's an adult, age 12 to the present. Okay, what happened at age 12? Where they moved, where there was a shift. Where from the victim, they became the victimizer. They moved into adulthood. So the person from age 12 to the present age, will you now tell me, we now need the birth certificate. What are the names? If you can tell me what are the names, do not try and get names in the beginning. Just do the talk through. Doug, will you just clarify what you do here about the names?
I have to actually be in the situation,
I know.
so it's hard for me to do it. But let's say the person's primary identity past the presenter is Alexandra, Alexandria, Anastasia. That's somebody I actually know. Maria. And sometimes they're hyphenated. Like Connie, her presenter is Constance Battenberg Schrock, the daughter of Queen Elizabeth. Her actual core identity is Constantina Anna Maria Alexandria Elizabeth Collins Hitler. So there's some hyphenated. There's still three primaries, but some of them are hyphenated. And sometimes those have to be brought together. The first one, Constantina, of the three primaries, is going to be the cult mother. It's going to be the wife, whether they want to say it's somebody else or not. We get those three that are extended out, and they telescope back into the original. And usually behind that, with her, was Ava, daughter of Hitler, wife of Hitler's children. So the three primaries, that's why I called them core shields. Tom called them primary identities.
Yeah.
Core shield, what are they shielding? The singularity.
Yeah.
Now we know it's the wife of Hitler, mother of his children, and right now I find over and over again, Ava Braun Hitler, Ava, it's the role of the wife. So I'm finding Ava. Now, you don't have to go in there with that because it took us a lot of years to get there. You're doing what she's saying. You don't have to worry about it. You'll get there. So, yeah, the first primary and second and third, the first one will be the closest to the conception. Because when the primaries are created at conception, they're there.
Yeah.
It's this click, click, click. There's a random, who's first, who's second, who's third. Even if it's microseconds, it's the first primary that will ultimately you're going to have. And the presenter will ultimately someday going to have to give up the separateness and come into that. It's not going to integrate into the presenter. The presenter will have to integrate into primary and ultimately the core.
So, the names on the birth certificate. New birth certificate, I'm writing it now. And as Doug was saying, these are the names. These are common names for the royals. It's Alexia, Alexandria, Alexandra, or Anastasia, or Maria, Anna Marie. And then you can address each name separately as distinct primaries or as a whole person. Because you're dealing with one person, but because of the splitting, they have different roles. They're in different domains. You need to include the presenter and the three primaries and talk to all of them. So you've got whoever is the presenter that's walked into the room and said, this is my name, this is who I am. But now we've got the three primaries, which is the names on the birth certificate at conception. Those are the primaries. Names can relate to specific bloodlines, roles, functions, and destinies. As Doug was saying, the royals with Elizabeth also. In the cult, you are who you are, functioned as a mother, who you are functioned as a wife. Remember what I explained to you? 13-year-old is the mother, 26-year-old is the wife. And who you are that functioned as a daughter. There's a daughter now of the father or fathers, as Doug was explaining, right at your birth. There are the kings, the circle of the kings that stand around the altar where this little baby's lying. But the real biological father will step up and he will then be the one that will do the three-way sex with that tiny little one. But that's why they say, but the other fathers. We had quite a few that would mention other fathers. And in the beginning I was confused. And I was saying to Doug, but they say this one, Philip is their father. They say this one's the father and this one's the father. But it's because it's the circle of kings standing around this baby, and it is to make them confused, to take them off course. But if you work with Neshama and you go right back, okay, who was the original biological father that abused you, that did the three-way sex, then it's going to come forward that it's whoever the biological father was in the royal bloodline. As Doug was saying many times, it's King George. During the initial fracturing event, the three-way sexual incest assault will also often represent three separate domains. As I explained to you, you've got the anal sex, you've got the vaginal sex, and you've got the oral sex. Pain and anger, there's the pleasure, escape. So the vaginal one will be the pleasure, which will be the Nimrod. Oh, it's great and wonderful. But the sodomy is the pain. Can you see opposite pain and pleasure? So they actually split the sexual areas, the vagina and the anal sex. When you're working to get to these domains, I learned so much when we were in Germany, our first trip. Laurie was saying we were working with people and they were saying we've got to work through these sexual areas. And many times they have a part that is called a penis or a part that's called a vagina. They are permanently in a state of orgasm. I said, what? It blows your mind when you hear these things. But that's how they split them off, and why everything is so sexual. Because Satan is destroying marriage covenant. It's all about destroying covenant, destroying covenant. Those are just some of the domains that you have to work through. Pleasure and the one that escapes. Then you've got sadness and death. So these may or may not correspond directly to daughter, wife, and mother. Often there's an overlap, and sometimes there will be multiple daughters, wives, mothers, and that's fine. In the beginning, you're going to get the mothers and the daughters and the wives, and it's okay. So it's going to come down to the wife, the mother, which is the core, the key one. Let's look at a daughter. Let's look at this daughter, which is from the beginning. Now it's the father that's abusing the child. Now she's a daughter. Often a multiple will have different aspects that relate to different biological fathers. As I said to you, I was confused, but it was the circle of kings, these men standing around the baby and doing these things, and then the baby's confused and doesn't know. When they report, it's this one and it's this one, and it's okay. Understand that there are other men standing in the circle, and so they do confuse the child. And that's fine too. Conflicts are not settled by discovering right and wrong. Just allow all aspects of being a daughter to be present. So all the daughters come forward, just be here. All of you, just be here. All the daughters, to be present and accepted as valid representations of self. So all of the daughters, and if you say, but I'm daughter of Hitler, I'm daughter of Mengele, I'm daughter of Philip, I'm daughter of... It's fine. You can be all the daughters. Come. So in the beginning, it sounds, okay, what are we doing? It should be one. No. Let them all, because there is confusion, there is tricking, but let them all be present. It's going to sort out.
Inviting you to come forward out of the past, where you were made separate in the trauma, to come forward and begin to see what it means to be together and to become the person that you never had a chance to be. Just come forward.
Okay. The other thing that was very good, Doug, was if there are many male parts, because in a female, there could be many male parts. And then the same with the daughters, so there are many daughters. And then Doug would ask, who's got the highest authority? I want to speak to that one. And when you bring the one with the highest authority forward, they will then all fit together. As you said, let them all be present and get to know each other, and they become one daughter.
Yeah, maybe I should just speak into that which is understood as introjection. Introjection means that in the trauma, if you've read any of Dr. Basil Van der Kolk's works, Trauma Encoding, he's an MD, he's not a Christian, The Body Keeps Score. These are medical books, but what they do is they help you understand the framework of trauma. When that little child is first traumatized, during the split, that which overpowered them was stronger than them. When they split, they go into the perpetrator, and the perpetrator goes into them. Not like actually, but in the phenomenology of dissociation. The father will now be inside. So that is now a construct. That construct will be empowered by, say, Apollyon or whatever. So I'll call out the father. Who's the God of the father? And I'll engage that in warfare and do blitzkrieg until he's nailed, okay? And he's off. And then what happened to the very first little girl was there in the beginning before the first internal male was created to be represented. So interjection is a phenomenology of trauma. And that male in every woman is seen to be strong. Well, because that little person, I need that person because they're strong. And it's often an internalized representation of the father. Or now, with the hybrid program, it'll be an internalized representation of the Antichrist hybrid.
Nimrod.
Yeah.
So do you understand that every time a baby gets traumatized, they go through whatever they do? This is how the brain works. The child will internalize. The perpetrator outside will now become inside. Are you with me? Whatever's done outside, if there's a Mengele outside, there'll be a Mengele inside. Philip on the outside, there'll be a Philip on the inside. Whatever outside is happening externally to the child internalizes the perpetrator. And so what they then do is they set up a system that you become your own perpetrator. Because they then program the internalized Mengele, the internalized programmers, to continue doing the work for the rest of their life until they get to Jesus. So now with a daughter, we see, I'm the daughter of King George VI. I'm the daughter of Hitler. I'm the daughter of Nicholas Romanov. So these are all the royals. Doug, you said The daughter of Romanov was the false prophet.
It's more on the
False prophet,
Jewish
side.
and
Yeah.
they want us to keep a split and conflict between the Jewish domain and the Gentile domain.
And Gentile.
Keep you split.
So that will be Hitler and the Nazi. So inside of a person, you're going to have the Hitler, the Nazi, or you're going to have a Jew. And then there's the conflict inside. And then you ask, do these fathers live inside? Because obviously they were outside, and now we want to know if they're inside. And then, yes. And then you say, okay, which one of those fathers that you've just said, they are fathers, which one is the closest to your conception? Right in the beginning. Who's the closest? Hitler? Romanov? Who's the closest? You then ask these questions to navigate, to find then the daughter of. Keep narrowing things down to that which represents foundations. Just take note, because these may change in future, because they're just getting more and more knowing as they're learning how Neshama works. Number one, first question you ask, who's the closest to your conception? Number two, who's number two then? If Hitler's number one, who's number two? Who's second father that's the closest to conception? Who's number three? So you're narrowing it down. We've looked at daughter, now let's look at mother. And this is where she becomes the hybrid breeder. So she's called by Satan, this is her role, she's got to be a Nephilim mother and she's got to birth and bring forth Nephilim children. Ask, did anything significant happen around the age of 12? Was there anything that happened to you around the age of 12? Remember Neshama, first answer, don't think. There's a rite of passage that takes place at age 12. We've spoken about it. The person makes a choice that signifies the death of all that was a victim, that was weak and a Christian. The one that accepted Jesus. Remember that 13-year-old that's so angry? Yes, kill it. There's a clone of that little one. There's a sacrifice. And as far as the 12-year-old, that's all they know. That little one is dead. She then conceives with Satan to produce a hybrid. So this is a huge thing that happens here at this age. She's agreeing with Satan with her will. She's willingly accepting Satan as her Lord. She turns to him, and if they are aware of becoming a mother, she says, oh wow, I did give birth. Some of them gave birth, and then they were told, you know what? You gave birth to a creature. You can't even birth a proper baby. And then they feel terrible. They were tricked. They were tricked, and they believed this lie that when they went through the birthing process, this is what I want to tell you. People have asked, with a 12, 13-year-old little girl pregnant, what happens at school? You're only pregnant 4 months with a Nephilim. The child will then be born. This little girl doesn't become pregnant like we know pregnancy. She just puts on a bit of weight. You can see this child is just putting on some weight for a while, and then, oh wow, the child's got her figure back. That's what happens with these Nephilim mothers. So it's 4 months they're pregnant. And this son is then born. So then, are you aware of becoming a mother? You as a mother, who did you conceive then? If you gave birth, who did you conceive? What happened there? Of course, first answer, that which I conceived was not human. That's Neshama, knowing it wasn't human. So who is the father of whatever you conceived? Who's the father here? And there normally is a pause, and then they say, Satan. But it's like a shock, because they can't believe what's coming out. They can't believe it. Presenter is finding this hard, because now they're hearing, Satan, then I must have had sex with Satan, and I'm giving birth to something that's not human, and he gave me his seed. And this is exactly what Genesis 6 is all about. So this is very common, but they don't know what to do with this knowledge. It's just so overwhelming. What must I do with this? I gave birth to something that's not human. So we see they aren't supposed to talk about this. They're not allowed to tell you anything about this. And if they're only aware of human children, then that's fine as well. Because sometimes they do also give birth to human children. It's not only hybrids. They could take human children and those children go into the cult. And many times they will then blackmail the mother to do their will by torturing the child that's in the cult. And because she's bonded to that child, she'll do anything to protect her child. And so they will keep human children in the cult who they can torture and torment and force the mother to do things for them. And she covers, she will not talk. She covers and protects that child. She's mother. She's mother. So she can have human children as well. It's not just Nephilim. She can have the human children. Then at age 13, they usually give birth to their first Nephilim son. So then she becomes the mother. Age 26, they marry the same Nephilim son. And it's now sealed as the wife. So there you have mother and wife in conflict. 13, 26. And then you ask, does the wife and the mother perceive to be the same, or are they different? That's a very good question. Mother and wife, are they the same or are they different? Often they say, no, they're different, they're separate. You see, the mother will usually carry one of the names of the three primaries. There usually is a conflict between the mother and the wife that needs to be worked on, and getting to these domains will take some time and often many sessions. It's just navigating your way with mother and wife. And so wife, she often holds the sexuality, the tenderness and the femininity, and is only allowed to express it in an incest bond with the son in the satanic throne union. It's the whole sexual thing. She's addicted to her son. It's incest, mother having sex married to her son. It's a whole incest thing. There's a satanic throne union. Every time she masturbates, every time she has sex, dreams about sex, whatever, the son comes, there's immediately an effect on the throne of Satan. It powers up the throne of Satan.
This whole paradigm that we're talking about goes back to Nimrod and Semiramis. Often this is internalized. And in Michael Lake's The Shinar Directive, he goes into, not what we're talking about here, but everything goes back in its ancient roots to Nimrod. Yeah. Semiramis.
And so there's usually a strong hatred related to one's sexuality and this primary. We work with ladies who are single and then they have strong lesbian stuff in them, very strong lesbian stuff, because there's a cult of goddesses, the woman, the top women of the nations that gather, and then they start training this tiny little baby. With the breastfeeding already, so while they breastfeed, they stimulate the baby. And so that's where the whole lesbian thing. So can you see the confusion that these people go through? It is so unfair. It is so evil. I mean, how do you take a tiny little baby who's drinking milk and sexually you're stimulating that child? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's really so evil. Can you think now they have to navigate their way out of this and find their sexuality? And then they despise being lesbian, but there's a part of them that's lesbian. It's all this confusion of what has happened inside of them. And so the amnesia and internal conflict can be extremely strong here with the sexual stuff. I want to wrap up. The wife, often the deepest expression of the wife believes it is the Lord that she's pleasing during these sexual unions. It's hectic. They're mixing religious stuff, and this is now a demigod she's having now sex with. And so she thinks she's like the Holy Virgin, like the temple prostitutes that gave their bodies and now they're pleasing the Lord. This heart's desire is shaved off right off the Christian heart and is stolen by Satan. So you know your identity, your womanhood, who you are as a human being is your sexuality. And so Satan comes to destroy you in the deepest part of your humanity, of who you are. If the survivor can learn to accept and love this aspect of themselves, then she will find hidden within her capacity for first love, worship, love, tenderness, and gentleness. Christ's very own lamb-like nature. You see, while you're rejecting this lesbian, while you're rejecting the witch, while you're rejecting whatever's dark and evil and ugly in you, you're not going to be able to become one whole person. You're not going to have the nature of the lamb. And so we have to tell the people, please don't reject your lesbian anymore. Embrace your lesbian. Embrace the witch. No, but I don't want to be a witch. Embrace them. Ask their forgiveness that you've rejected them, that you didn't want anything to do with them. Embrace them because it's part of you. That witch is part of you. That lesbian's part of you. You need her, she needs you, so that you can become whole, become what God made you from the beginning. Can you see it's a process? That is the integration part. And it happens, it just happens, God does it. As they embrace that which was separated off, and they embrace that and draw it close, then the healing can come. It's only through deception that this capacity can remain captive. And so while the lies are there, while Satan says, but you're a lesbian, while Satan says your sexuality is filthy and defiling, while you believe all of that, that's going to keep the dividedness in place. And so it's also important to note there may be wives that are not aware of their humanity. There may be wives for the beast. There may be wives for Satan. There may be wives for hybrids. Can you see there are also many daughters as well as many wives? So you've got the wives of the beast, the wife for Satan, the wife of hybrids that prefer sodomy sex above vaginal sex. And then wives for men, human men. Can you see also they're different wives? Each of these must be validated, accepted, and honored. You don't push them away. You don't reject them anymore. You embrace them. The sooner you can accept this as part of who you are. Satan took this. You've been tricked. They deceived you. Embrace. It's part of your humanity. Once you can start embracing those parts that you rejected because you're this Christian, this holy person. Once you start saying, but okay, you as the presenter, give up your separateness and move into the witch. I don't want to be a witch. I'm going to become a witch. Watch and see what God does. Give up your separateness as the holy presenter. Give it up and move forward and go and embrace the witch. Go and embrace the lesbian because she's part of you. She belongs to you and you belong to her and you need her. And she needs you. They need to be honored. They need to be validated. All these different wives. And then shame is, of course, the biggest challenge. Okay? This is a huge thing. You want to run away because you're so ashamed of your background, of what was done to you, of who you told. You know, you're just absolutely a rubbish. You're lower than an animal. Shame. They work on shame. It's really very difficult to work with shame because shame will keep you protected. You don't want to go there. You're so shameful. If one can learn to see shame as another validation of their experience instead of a threat or a hindrance, then progress is quick. Isn't that special? If you can see shame as another validation of your experience, they made me feel shameful. It wasn't my fault. They told me how dirty I am and how what I'm doing is terrible and it's my fault. And now I feel so ashamed. And so if I can take shame and I can work with shame, my progress is going to be so much quicker. And then shame is an emotion not to be feared. And a lot of times survivors stop because they're too ashamed to work further. And I'm sorry, I want to apologize as a counselor, where as counselors we have put shame onto survivors. I am sorry for that. In any situation, in any words, or in anything, I want to ask forgiveness every time that a counselor put shame on you because you didn't ask for whatever you've been through. That was not your choice. You didn't ask for it. And so I really apologize where counselors have hurt you, have treated you like your deliverance parts have been like ritual, and where counselors have abused you because they didn't understand. I ask your forgiveness in the name of Jesus, and that you are able to get past that, to get to work towards healing. And where shame was used to keep you in bondage, I am sorry. I am really sorry for that. If it's come from the church, if it's come from counselors, people in ministry that have shamed you, I'm really sorry. And I pray that God will take these words and take off the shame, take off the mantle of shame from you, and that you will be free to come forward and to receive help. Shame is not an emotion to be feared. It validates the truth, but it's also subject to the truth. Amen.
When you get to shame, which is really foundational, okay, I invite all of you in the core of who you are, you're in shame. There's confusion. It's not your fault. I just declare to you in Jesus' name, it's not your fault. I did that the other day and the girl just broke down. She slid right into a little shower part. So I said, okay, there's shame there. I'm speaking to your core person. I'm talking to you now. I am ashamed because, what's the message? Tell me the message. Well, I wanted it. This happened to me because I'm bad. Okay? I want you to feel that. This is the theophostic part. What does that feel like? Does it feel true? Yes. Okay, I want you to feel that. Feel the shame. Father God, in Jesus' name, what is the truth about the shame? Just wait. What is the truth? And if anger comes up, we're going to have to go deal with that because that's shielding. Okay, what are you angry at? Well, we've got to deal with that. And then we'll go back to shame. Eventually, when you get the anger cleared off, the shame, the Lord will say, it's not my fault. He just comes in. And that releases that at that level of core. There may be some multiple times in that. But you have to allow God to speak into the shame. But there's always a message or a belief the shame is anchored to.
So there's a belief system. Remember the core beliefs? And that's what the shame is holding on to. So that needs to be broken for the shame to lift.
Addie told me that she was taken to places, she was destroyed, and she was supernaturally brought back
supernaturally
together.
healed.
Yeah,
they break bones and then they heal it. Supernaturally heal the bone. So they can't prove you broke my arm.
Yeah.
And they break their legs in rituals. And then you say, but how did you heal? No, they magically heal you. That's how they do it.
If you've never read The Beautiful Side of Evil by Joanna Michelson, she describes going into Mexico and watching magic surgery and actually seeing the supernatural healings occur. But there's always a cost. There's always some occult bondage that comes out of it.
Doug, I'm done. So I'm giving over to you and Michelle and whatever we're going to do from now onwards.
Okay. Something that came to my mind on my website, which is dougriggs.org. Right at the top, there's a new posting. It's called Luciferian Kingdomization. The Luciferian Kingdomization actually gives you a conceptual framework over what is going on. The defilement, that which the enemy has done to these people. So as you read through the Luciferian Kingdomization, it actually shows you the mindset of the enemy. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and to defile. And so what you've heard today, God's cleansing of all you, because it's all designed to destroy or corrupt the image of God. It's in there. Dr. Terry Clapp did a wonderful job. He got taken down by 5 people who were set up in a clinic to report that he had sexually abused them. He lost his license. I really questioned, did he really do that? But he spoke before his time. This is 1993. He was speaking about a reality that you're hearing today. If Terry was here, he would say, I know most of what you're talking about. That's 1993. Not necessarily everything, but a lot of that really core framework that we're talking about.